Hold up, I ain't trying to stump, man, but the Yeezys jumped over the jump, man. I be in and out of arenas like I'm Scottie Pippen.
Left my elbow in the pot, a la Vince Carter.
Bitch, you wasn't with me shooting in the gym?
James Harden with the range on me, nigga, way back.
Coach, they won't knock me off my pivot, get it.
Been flowing stupid since Vince Carter was on some through the legs arm and a hoop shit.
And you could live through anything if magic made it.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know, now you do.
Yes, sir. We are back. Round of applause for yourselves. We got a few things on the docket for today. We're going to talk about the recent offensive explosion. And we're going to hear from Steve Kerr and Adam Silver on what rules could be tweaked to kind of help curve some of this redundant scoring. And also we'll go over some of the unintended effects of the 65-game rule. Did owners find a clever way of saving money? And KD heads back to Brooklyn for the first time, looking for some of that BK love. We'll talk about him suffering from some of the negative effects of the players' movement. And finally, does your team have a bubble superstar? What's going on in Chicago with Zach Lavine, as the Bulls are finding out in the trade market that there is no demand for their superstar. So we'll touch base on some of the dynamics that's playing out in Chi-Town. So the league right now is beginning to hit a reflection point as we're seeing the offensive explosions this season. Multiple 60-point game nights. We're seeing guys take advantage of using their off arm to create space and use their momentum to push guys off. Stephen Curry utilizes this, and also SGA especially. And they have perfected this move so well that it's hitting to a point where guys are pretty much shooting about 60% from the field most nights. Now in 2021, the league has made a few adjustments, especially with the verticality, with the centers, where they can go straight up, and if there's contact, they're given the benefit of the doubt, and also the crackdown of just non-offensive moves in the perimeter, guys kicking their legs out, or just the way they land when they take their shots, or they jump into contact. Those moves are no longer allowed, so defenders are given the benefit of the doubt from that perspective. But the game has evolved so much, especially with guys playing 5 out. There's so much room within the perimeter, and at the same time defenders are trying to avoid 3 seconds in the paint. It leaves a lot of open space, all the way to the point that this current season it's actually a lot easier to take 2-point shots and knock them down with high efficiency due to the spacing. But once again, the NBA is hitting a reflection point where they're tweaking their television product for the viewing audience to try to keep their attention, while at the same time trying to negotiate a brand new TV deal and pretty much almost double, if not triple, their current TV revenue. But Steve Kerr was asked about the modern game and the uptake in scoring. And interesting enough, Steve Kerr was asked about the uptake in scoring. And for the Golden State Warriors, they were once viewed as the pioneers of this type of style of play, even though it's been pretty much done way before them. They pretty much taken what the bad boy Pistons of the 80s did and modernized it. But the league has caught up to what they're doing, and also due to the fact that their players are aging, they're getting more exposed as the years go by. So the modern game has not only benefited this team, but at the same time as they age, it exposes them a lot more, as offenses get way more efficient and they can't hide their lack of size and defending as they once did when teams weren't quite as efficient in scoring.
Well, I mean, guys are so skilled today. There's so much space on the floor. You know, everybody's playing multiple bigs who can shoot threes, and so there's just too much ground to cover for the defense. Pace is up. You know, over the last few years, everybody's playing faster and with more pace, and teams have gotten really confident in their offensive schemes, you know, with all that spacing and pace. And, you know, so the last few years, offensive ratings have just been climbing and climbing. And then the final piece of it for me is just, you know, the way we officiate the game favors the offense in a way that it didn't, you know.
There he goes talking about those off-arm moves where guys push off. You see SGA in OKC, he does this a lot. The way he pushes off, it's legal, and defenders can't really hand check that. They have to have their elbows tucked in a certain way, and SGA is allowed to push off, and that's one of the rules that have been tweaked recently to quote unquote allow more free flowing offensive movement. That's part of that package.
15 years ago, it's the rules have been altered to really give the benefit of the doubt to the offensive player. So I think we're actually entering a phase now where we're going to have to look at, just like the league did 20 years ago, kind of look at the rules, see where the game's going, and maybe make some adjustments back in the other direction.
And Steve Kerr nails it on the head, because just like how the league looked back and took away defenders using the hand check, now they've pretty much gone the opposite direction and allowed the offensive players to actually push off. But the league in a way is going to be in a balancing act, because they're going to have to make the game appealing enough in television and also make it make sense on the court. Because at the end of the day, the entertainment aspect of the game is what makes the money, and the TV revenue is what this is all about. But Kerr also further elaborated on what exact rule changes he wants to see, and he went in full detail with this one.
So you're not going to make changes to the scheme. Where you're going to make changes is with the defensive positioning rules that are in place right now. If I could tell you the number of times where, a player wildly drove into us and ran into us, and I went to the ref, and the ref used the expression illegal guarding position. So what's happened is the way we are interpreting the rules is favoring the offense.
And the league went through this before. In the 2006 NBA Finals, D Wade just went to the free throw line relentlessly, and the league had to tweak some of the rules, allowing defenders to have a bit more freedom in defending guards attacking the rim. But again, the current rules have actually benefited and also had negative impacts on no other team more than the Golden State Warriors. And right now, with their players aging and just their lack of size, they're getting exposed. But Adam Silver also spoke on just having a balance between tweaking the rules in favor of the television product being more appealing and also creating balance where it makes sense on the court.
When I'm watching today's game, I feel like I'm downloading the latest play. And what I mean by that is, obviously we can go through each age and see the game and the style of how it's played. When I watch now, points are like 144, I think I saw the other night, and 125. And I remember being in some All-Star games where I think we scored maybe 144, 140. Like, is the high scoring working? Is speeding the game up? I asked this with a follow-up because I want to know, will there ever be a time in our lives where the hand check comes back? Is that going? Is this kind of the wave in which we're going now?
I'll answer it coming from the fan in me, which is, and maybe data comes into play here because I can look at television ratings and other measures of interest. There was a point, I believe, probably in around the late 90s when the game became too physical. And I think we lost some of
For our viewers, you mean?
Yeah, and I think for our fans, from the aesthetic enjoyment of the game.
And also the data actually told the league that the ratings were down. That shit was not interesting. There were games back in the early 2000s where the final score would be 78-64. And just that whole early 2000s era, you could just look at a lot of the final scores going all the way into the NBA Finals. They were very low scoring games. And that's when the ratings, especially with the Pistons and San Antonio Spurs, those early 2000s was just brutal. And those were also the beginning years after the Jordan era. So the league was definitely in a testing phase where they're trying to actually rekindle that audience to coming back and maintaining their interest in the NBA post Michael Jordan.
Where it de-emphasized the particular skill a player had and maybe weighted too heavily physicality, where a big, strong player could come in and prevent a incredibly skilled player from doing those kinds of things.
While at the same time, that big, strong player did not contribute anything of value entertainment-wise. It's not like they were jumping and dunking or just scoring and keeping fan interest. If they weren't knocking other dudes out or just getting into fight, they really provided very little entertainment value.
I think of, not that he's a small guy, but a smaller player like Steph Curry can do on the floor. I think that when you think of some of his ability to shoot, his ability to move through the paint, that if guys could just bang him and knock him to the ground, as that was once the case in the league, I don't think that would be a better brand of basketball.
And it definitely was not. It was actually proven in the early 2000s. Once again, Adam Silver went directly to the data, and the data told the league that that shit was not working. And a lot of those guys that were the enforcers back then, just the guys that were knocking guys out or just the tough guys of the team, those guys would not last in today's league. The game and the skill sets of players have evolved so much. It's at a point where if you're a non-shooter, you have to be a center. And it's even getting to the point that if you're a center and you cannot provide any type of shooting or any type of offense, it's starting to become a liability also. So there's definitely a higher standard for players actually getting minutes on the court right now.
I also think we have to find the right balance, because I know when I sit in the stands or talk to friends sometime, they want to bring back physicality, where a big, strong player could come in and prevent a incredibly skilled player from doing those kinds of things. I think of, not that he's a small guy, but a smaller player like Steph Curry can do on the floor. I think that when you think of some of his ability to shoot, his ability to move through the paint, that if guys could just bang him and knock him to the ground, as that was once the case in the league, I don't think that would be a better brand of basketball. I also think we have to find the right balance, because I know when I sit in the stands or talk to friends sometime, they want to bring back, and we've tried to bring back a little bit more of the physicality. Like, I think people like to see hard defense. I mean, it goes a little bit before to what you and I are talking about, like touch and feel. Like, I don't think either people like that idea that guys can go through unscathed and like you're protecting your star players. And in fact, you know, we made some changes this season where sort of, I don't know, you know, the unnatural basketball moves, you know what I'm referring to, and where those were being, players were gaming the system in a way.
Catching on.
He's talking about players like Trae Young and James Harden. Those non-basketball moves, kicking out their legs, backing into defenders, jumping into defenders also. A lot of the guards throughout the league have been making these type of moves, and it's a good thing that those have been taken away. The hooking of the arms, especially with James Harden, that shit got annoying, and it can actually stop the flow of the game.
Brilliant players playing by the rules had found ways where those were becoming defensive fouls. So we reset this year, which is something you got to do in the offseason. You don't want to change mid-course, but we made it clear, those players, that that's no longer going to be a foul. And of course, because they're the greatest players, they adjust and they find other ways to score. So I like where we're going in terms of that brand of basketball. In terms of scoring for its own sake, I don't necessarily think what fans tune into is just to see scoring for its own sake, because that's where I think people want to see real defense. To me, it goes more to the pace of the game.
And also the style of play. There used to be teams that had different styles. Not everyone ran up and shot threes or just settled for layups. To see a team that played fast versus a team maybe that had a big man that slowed down the game and mastered the half-court offense, it used to be interesting to see. Now, when you have every team playing the same way, it's pretty much made the game very predictable. And it's probably more than likely a correlation of the low ratings.
I don't think people like a lot of stoppages. And also, data tells a story there. For example, in Nielsen ratings, they're minute by minute. You can tell when people are tuning out, and when games are being streamed, it's second by second. You know exactly when people are losing interest in your game. And so, as I know you know, we pulled back on the amount of replays this season. You know,
and it's almost like watching two different prize fighters go head to head with different styles. I believe the NBA is missing that aspect.
You know, fewer opportunities for the referees to go to the monitors. Because even in talking to players, like nobody, you know, especially in a game where there's as much scoring as ours and there's much opportunities, frankly, to make up for a bad call. Most players I talk to, if it's a game-deciding play and it's the guy's foot on the line or not, you want to know that. On the other hand, if it's a bad call, I mean, there are bad calls into the third quarter. Do guys want to stop and wait for 2.5 minutes while the guy goes to the monitor? Because you could easily, people have said to me, well, with technology these days, you should be able to get every call right. And I said, we could. The game would be 5 hours long, but we could. So what's the right balance? And, you know, it's something we're constantly tweaking us.
I think the scoring actually helps. Makes me watch. I enjoy watching. I love the new moves. I love the new style.
But I assume you want to see defense.
playoff time.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a work in progress. The league has definitely given offensive players the freedom of movement. That's why we don't really see guys get called for carries anymore. And they also have tucked in their whistles when it comes to the amount of steps guys are taking. What's their gather step, if it's a travel or not. They've been very loose about calling those. But after that Luka Doncic 70-point game, there's been an emphasis on the amount of scoring the league has kind of permitted, especially this season, because that game overall was not a good look for the league. I mean, Luka just had phases of the game where he was just going to the rack without even being touched. So definitely adjustments will need to be made. And with Adam Silver, he's not afraid of making them. So when the current CBA was negotiated, a few things to me stuck out. For one, the owners and the players reached an agreement very quickly. And two, the players were able to snag a higher portion of the revenue sharing than the owners did. And it made me wonder, how did all these billionaires that have a team of lawyers who work for firms that have decades of understanding contract language let the players on the surface level seem to gain the advantages over them? But as time progressed, we're starting to see a bit of unraveling of what was really lying underneath the cracks. With the 65-game rule, it's also tied to players making All-NBA and winning individual season awards, which is also tied into their contracts. Now, Tyrese Halliburton this season could be one of the first victims of this new 65-game rule, as he went down with a hamstring injury early this season and then quickly came back and then sort of re-injured himself, and now he's up to a 22-game per minute restriction just to maintain his standing so he could possibly re-up for Supermax. But if he does continue to miss games, he could miss out on over making $40 million. But interesting enough, your favorite Shot Jackers podcast, Gilbert Arenas, spoke on this. You guys check it out, and every once in a while I'll check in.
That 65 thing issue is saving owners money. All it is, because if you're Indiana, right?
Indiana, first of all, is a franchise that has always been known to trying to save money. As AD made a commitment to Paul George of wanting to go to Indiana, but the Pacers kind of allude to Paul George that they were really in business of just being competitive and just selling tickets. And this is out of Paul George's mouth.
You would rather him miss all these games and not make an All-NBA, so you can get him $40 million cheaper.
Right.
That's what he's alluding to.
Yeah, because at the end of the day,
right? You know what I mean? I'm a small market team.
I don't want to have to pay you.
If I can save $40 million, think about where I can put the $40 million.
Right. Because you probably ain't gonna stay here anyway.
And they banking on you not playing that 65.
I'm even enticing it. Oh, we're not going. Hey, shit, ooh, that's still hot back there. I'm gonna say whatever to keep you the fuck off the court. Championship teams are built off bad contracts, right?
That is facts. That is facts. Even Michael Jordan, in a way, even LeBron James out in Miami, I wouldn't necessarily say they were in bad contracts, but they definitely took a discount.
The Bulls was built off of bad contracts, right? Steph Curry's championships was built off bad contracts.
That wasn't necessarily a bad contract. That was the Warriors actually giving him a handout early, because Steph at the time was viewed as a player that's more likely from season to season will miss 20+ games because of his ankles. He was having a lot of leg issues early on in his career. But I'm gonna shoot the Pacers some bail. They are playing Halliburton 22 minutes to actually fulfill the obligations of him making those 65 games. But once again, those could be for optics.
Hurt his ankle, right? They got him for cheap. They got his ass for cheap because of his ankles, right? So now he becomes this mega star making $55, $60 million, right? So,
and they also got him for mega cheap, while at the same time in 2017, the salary cap going up, which allowed them to sign Kevin Durant.
So when Kevin Durant's coming up, they're like, oh shit, we got max money.
Oh, we got
max money. Because, our best player's not max, right? So here, we can give you this, right? And you sign it for 2 years. Now y'all both up at the same time, and then we can go from there. But I get to rent a max player because I don't have that money capped off. So, this gives them a chance, like with Ja Morant. He's $40 million cheaper, right? My super max player is not super max right now.
Yeah.
Yay.
Right.
Yo, Gilbert Arenas be bugging out, but every once in a while, he definitely gives you some gems. And with Ja Morant, that's not really his franchise doing that. That's really all on him being an idiot. But once again, that's another small market team in the Memphis Grizzlies benefiting from the 65-game rule.
Right? Halliburton, my Supermax player, not Supermax. Right? So when you're talking about, I don't need so that they can, so technically they can go out there and get them a Supermax player. So on record or on their stat sheet, Halliburton is their second highest paid player. So instead of having 2 max, I got 1 Supermax and 1 max. So he becomes Jaylen Brown to Boston. I got him, you know, my Supermax is gonna be Tatum.
Which is like 330 or something.
It's gonna be up there, man.
So with the 65-game rule, the way the owners actually structured this was as a team rule. So all the owners came in together and they actually skated around the players' union. They actually didn't have to even speak to them about it because this is a rule that's imposed on teams. But at the end of the day, it affects players' contracts, which are also tied to certain individual awards. That's why it's surprising that the players and owners agreed to a new CBA so quick. These owners have teams of lawyers that know how to skate their way around contracts and also money. And this is looking like only the beginning of some of the cracks that's going to start to show with this new CBA, because another thing that's low-key been taken away is player movement. So when we look at the new CBA on the surface level, yeah, the players are taking more percentage of the revenue, but the way the owners structured everything, their superstars, which are really the ones that are receiving the bulk of the revenue, actually have to get to it and endure a little bit of luck through that 82-game grueling season. But hey, there could still be amendments made to this new rule because there is an other side to this coin. They could be forcing their star players, which are pretty much the real main attraction, they could be forcing them to come back way too early in order to get their money and risking even further injury as we see it play out with Joel Embiid. Owners definitely don't want to risk their most valuable assets in their superstars, as we've seen with the Milwaukee Bucks brand new ownership, that the value of Giannis attached to that franchise also helps them in the overall evaluation of how much that franchise is worth. Same thing for the Phoenix Suns owner, going after Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal after he purchased that team for an inflated price of $4 billion. So their superstars being attached to their franchise's evaluation is real important. I'm pretty sure the owners are going to make amendments to not put their superstars at risk. But hey, at the end of the day, one thing that can't be overlooked is that these owners have teams of lawyers who understand contract language, and they're crafty enough to frame this 65-game rule as getting rid of quote-unquote load management culture and getting back to basketball. So on the surface level, they're marketing this a certain way, but at the same time, underneath the cracks, this could potentially save them a lot of money, and shifting some of that revenue share that the players have, I believe is at 51%, they can actually shift that balance back their way. Because even though the owners have emphasized that this 65-game rule is something that's imposed as a team rule, we all know it affects the individual players, and you could look no further than the superstars of teams. Because now that ties into individual awards, which then those individual awards also ties into them getting certain supermax contracts. So we'll see how this plays out. So this will be a continuation of my series in which Kevin Durant is suffering from the negative effects of the players' movement. And this will be volume 2 as he returned to Brooklyn to a lackluster of just energy and love, especially with his player tribute, as you can see from those of you who are watching the video version.
Kevin Durant, easy money, baby.
He reaches the 25,000-point plateau.
To commemorate Kevin Durant as one of the 75 greatest players in NBA history.
And forward, 6'10" from Texas, Kevin Durant.
But ironically, on the same day he returned to Brooklyn, Damian Lillard on the other side of the pond had made his return to Portland, and the energy and love was completely different, as Dame was actually even given a pre-game presser as well as a post-game presser where he pretty much stayed for a long time answering questions, showing love to former workers. It was as if they just dedicated that whole day to Dame. He even got a basketball gym named after him. But Kevin Durant's time in Brooklyn was quite interesting because not only he showed up just out of the blue and last minute, as the Brooklyn Nets management said they had no idea KD was even coming. But when he came to Brooklyn, he was out for that initial first season, and then in his second season that was around the time of the pandemic, so fans weren't really in the stands. And by the time he signed a contract renewal with the Nets, he was already asking to get traded after a first round sweep against the Boston Celtics, which left a lot to be desired from this whole KD experience. But in his return to Brooklyn, KD was asked a lot of interesting questions, and you know shit starts turning left when you start separating your individual success versus your team's success. You guys check it out, and every once in a while I'll check in.
I mean, I like to look at success as like the individuals, what you do as an individual and how you can bring that as a team. As an individual, I mean, I was All-Star every year. I was leading vote getter every year in All-Star games. Sold a lot of jerseys, 50, 40, 90, like average 30, like all NBA. I mean, was that successful? Yeah, you know what I mean? But team success is a different thing. But you like to put how the team does, you like to put that on one of the best players and call it a failure. But you look at the work. If you want to talk about me individually, you just look at the work that I put in here. I think I've grown as a player. I think I'm on my way to mastering the game. I think it was, coming here helped me, push me far closer to that, So that's what I try to take from my time here.
Now, sometimes I wonder if KD is just a person that just has a string of bad luck. First of all, he has to understand when he arrived in Brooklyn, it kind of looked like that wasn't his first choice. He just kind of tagged along with Kyrie. And second of all, he was not there long enough to actually have an impact on the franchise. Now, as we all know, New York City is a Knicks town. And in the 2020-2021 season, the Knicks, to everyone's surprise, became a relevant team. So guys like Julius Randle and Derrick Rose were getting much more love from the city than KD was, even though KD was a top 3 player. And I can say this as a native New Yorker, the city is completely dominated by the Knicks. It is definitely a Knick town. So that's a strike going up against KD. Now in 2021, he did have a great season where he almost led the Nets to the finals. But unfortunately, by the time he renewed his contract, he was already asking for his way out. And this is all after a first round exit by the Boston Celtics. Pretty much a first round ass whooping. So KD has to understand his team's success is part of the Brooklyn Nets showing you love. And once again, he's going to suffer from the negative effects of this player movement. Because at the end of the day, most players after retirement, they're going to have to go back somewhere and hang up their jersey and have that fan base actually hold their career up almost to a higher esteem than other fan bases. So KD right now at this moment, he does not have that coalition right behind him. And we've seen players like Carmelo Anthony, which I covered in volume 1 of this series, going through the same thing on his reflection that the Nuggets gave Jokic his jersey number. Once again, these guys post-retirement are going to be looking to hang up their jersey somewhere. Maybe not in the rafters, but just hang it up somewhere where that fan base will hold their career to a higher esteem than other fan bases throughout the league. And right now we see Carmelo Anthony clinging on to the Knicks as trying to have him as that fan base to hold his career up to a higher esteem. But continuing on with Kevin Durant, he was also asked about what could have been in Brooklyn.
Do you think about that? Like, what could have been at all?
No. I mean, it's just a pointless exercise in my opinion to think about what could have been. I mean, what happened? That's what I'm thinking. That's what I thought about. What actually happened, the reality of it. We didn't have enough time together. That's just it. Guys wanted to go their separate ways. We tried our hardest to, salvage everything and bring everything together. We had 3 or 4 different teams since the first, when I signed here until when I left. But at the end of the day, I enjoy coming to work, playing for, being a part of this community, and playing, representing Brooklyn. Regardless of what went on, what said, or how I felt, I still came to work.
Damn, KD, you made that sound like a job. Oh man, KD gonna have to take more responsibility on what went down in Brooklyn. Because even the coaching selection, that was all you and Kyrie. And even in the beginning of that segment when he said guys made the decision to part their ways, KD, you the captain. Everything starts with you. It shouldn't start with other guys. And that's pretty much been the problem with him being in Brooklyn. He never really took onus for the team. If Kyrie's trying to leave, the stories in the headlines should be you running after Kyrie to get him to stay. And for KD, he kind of did set a precedent for a guy who signed a brand new 4-year extension and won it out right away. That has never really been seen on his type of level before. KD's a top 3 player. That's pretty much a face of a franchise. We've never seen a guy on that level ask out like that. But in this league, optics does matter. And KD this season in Phoenix, at some point he's going to have to deliver for the Suns, because since he's not a homegrown player, they are not going to hold his career to the same esteem. And with Stephen Curry in 2022 winning an NBA championship, it's actually put the pressure more on KD to have solo success, because the narrative was Stephen Curry could never really win a ring without KD. Even though he did win one in 2015, that was against an injury-riddled Cleveland Cavalier team. So once Steph won one by himself in 2022, it pretty much solidified the other ones that he got with KD. So Durant left a perfect situation in Golden State to go solo and to sort of prove the naysayers that he can do it all by himself. But he has to understand he does have to bear the responsibility of all the negative effects of you just hopping from team to team. Because post-retirement, he is going to want a fan base vouching for him to at least be top 10 or top 20, whatever you think he falls among the legendary players. You do want to have that sense of community behind you. But right now, KD does not have that. The OKC fans feel like KD turned his back on them. The Golden State Warriors will never hold KD up to a higher esteem than their homegrown talent of Stephen Curry. The Brooklyn Nets was way too short-lived. And joining the Phoenix Suns in your 14th NBA season, which looks like almost a desperation pivot, is going to have to yield in some sort of results, because that fan base is definitely not going to hold you to the same esteem as other homegrown players that they had. So KD definitely falls under one of those guys this season that have a lot of pressure to bring home an NBA championship. Now, back in 2020, the NBA had to wrap up their regular season at Walt Disney due to the pandemic situation. And they created this bubble in which the stars had nothing to do but to focus on the game. And it created an environment in which we've seen role players were getting career highs. We've seen guys like TJ Warren average 26 points per game. And even the regular stars like Jaren Jackson Jr. averaging above his points normals at 25 points per game. And even Damian Lillard at 33 points per game. And guys were balling out so crazy that the term Mickey Mouse MVP was actually coined. Or you could even say the bubble star came about. And the same formula that allowed TJ Warren to average 26 points per game in the bubble, it actually gets cooked up from season to season, is that we just don't see it, and it's very subtle. A lot of that does have to do with marketing. But in the curious case of Zach Lavine, especially when guys first come into the league, being at least a top pick, and then their first piece of action on the court, whether they're high flyers or they're just a shiny new kid on the block, it leaves plenty of room for them to get marketed a certain way, and it kind of creates that bubble-like atmosphere around that player. Even though once he's outside of that bubble, just like TJ Warren, they never even average nowhere near the 26 points per game. And in the curious case of Zach Lavine, the same thing applies here. Now in Minnesota, Tom Thibodeau was kind of looked down upon by just giving Zach Lavine away and acquiring older assets that he was used to, like Jimmy Butler, just to see Lavine average about 25 points per game in Chicago. But yet 10 seasons in, Zach Lavine has never been part of an NBA team that has had a winning record. And this is a guy that's been the leader of the Chicago Bulls for about 7 years. Now, even though this season he's dealing with a lot of injuries, the Bulls kind of have the same record without him. Right now, they're 10-15 with Zach, and without him, they're 13-12. So the records look very similar, and his impact on the game is not really felt. Once again, like I said, the bubble-like atmosphere is very subtle. The guy is going to continue averaging what he averages, but you can start to see the cracks within the whole scenario because the team does not get past a certain level. Now, the Chicago Bulls in the past few trade deadlines have actually remained committed to this team, as they did not trade away DeMar DeRozan, Alex Caruso, and even Andre Drummond, who's in a favorable contract. All these guys are kind of wanted by teams that are contending, but they're sticking with Lavine. And like how I said before, Lavine, 10 years in, has never been part of a team that finished the regular season with a winning record. He's a high flyer, high scoring guard who does not really play defense like that. And at times he gets hurt way too often. As now approaching the trade deadline, he's admitting after getting hurt twice this year already that he's going to have season-ending surgery and be out 4 to 6 months. So once again, it looks like the Bulls are still going to have to be committed to Lavine. And there's probably reasons outside of basketball we could look into, such as the Chicago Bulls being a team with the highest attendance in the league. So they are definitely a cash cow revenue for the families that own that team. But unfortunately for them, with Zach LaVine, they're not bad enough to tank, but they're not also good enough to compete. They're always going to fall in that tier of just competing to get into the play-in. From, I believe, number 8 seed to 10, they're always going to be in that tier. And the Bulls just owing Zach LaVine $130 million for the next 3 years. It's going to be very hard to trade this guy. That's a lot of money committed, especially with this new CBA. And perhaps contending teams like the Lakers don't want to hit that second tier on the salary cap and get penalized for a guy that they're not sure if he's even going to be on the court for 70 plus games. But I ask this question once again, does your franchise have a bubble superstar? Zach LaVine, 10 years in, has never been part of a team with a winning record. And the Chicago Bulls have shopped him around this season, and they've been pretty much told that they have to attach some sort of assets like a draft pick or two with LaVine in order to get rid of him. This sort of situation kind of reminds us of Allen Iverson towards the end of his career, how he really wasn't wanted by any team. He was viewed more of a liability. Same thing for Carmelo Anthony at the end of his career. I'm not saying Zach is at the end of his career, but if he doesn't evolve his game and fit it into a framework where teams can extract winning out of what he brings to the game, he's almost going to find himself stuck as that bubble star in Chicago. Because right now there's nowhere else he's going to go where he's going to average 27 points a game. But we'll see. There's other motivating factors for Chicago. It looks like they want to keep their fans happy. They're number one in stadium attendance, and I'm pretty sure they want to keep the cash flowing. It is what it is. Until next time, you fellas, stay safe. Peace.